Putting a video game into historical perspective, this leisure activity has been predominantly for males. As Chapter 2 of Many Voices, Historical Perspective of Women's Leisure states, a recorded history of women's leisure is virtually non-existent. Historically, girls and boys have been trained to fill different social roles. In this article, you'll learn that leisure activities were not appropriate for women. Society felt that if women took time for themselves, they would be taking away from their own duties to the children and to their household. In the past, females rarely, if ever, participated in video games. As BMI Gaming states, the earliest known instance of an interactive electronic game was first created in 1947 by both Thomas T. Goldsmith Jr. and Cecil Ray Mann, and entitled as the Cathode Ray Tube amusement device, which in reality was the first missile simulation game and inspired by the radar displays from World War II and were shown on early cathode ray tubes. Following Goldsmith and Mann was the bouncing ball and checkers that would also be dominated by males. Today, women frequently participate in video games. As the University of Minnesota states, most video games were boy-orientated until video game makers discovered that girls were interested in playing video games too. Soon Miss Pac-Man, who wore lipstick and a red bow on her head, slowly but surely, girls were able to play games as boys did. In 2007, a study found that the Entertainment Software Association reported that 30% of all video game players were adult women, compared to 23% of players who were boys under 18. I believe that historical changes in women participating in video games changed with time. Education Database Online states that 2 out of 5 gamers are now female. I think men became more accepting to women playing when they began playing video games that were available for females, and in turn there is far more participation than the beginning of video game playing. Playing video games fit into traditional ideals for leisure for males because of history's social definition of leisure. Tradition would have it that boys would learn how to shoot and hunt while the woman cooks and cleans. With video games, this fit in with the male tradition because it was an activity of leisure, and surely a woman should be tending to household duties instead of taking time for herself. My experience with this activity proves once again that men are more interested in leisure with violence and aggression, such as football, wrestling, boxing, and hockey. They eagerly participate and watch these events. These sports are all predominantly male, and most of the games, if not all, are violent and aggressive. As the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence states, 1 in every 4 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. Boys who witness domestic violence are twice as likely to abuse their own partners and children when they become adults. I initially didn't participate in this activity because my parents wouldn't allow it. They believed it could lead to bad behaviors, from watching murder, robbery, arson, drug dealing, and kidnapping. For my leisure activity, I played Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars and was surprised to see that this game was involved in drug dealing and murder. It could be played by my 17-year-old son. As GameSpot states, you might think that the profanity, drug dealing, and violence from the original version of the game would be cut dramatically de-emphasized in the iPhone version. Luckily, it all remains untouched. Fans of the series will still find everything that they have come to love. Witty writing, gritty violence, lots of profanity, and a cast of morally dubious characters. The game has garnered a 17+ rating for a reason and shouldn't be overlooked if they're thinking about buying the game for a younger child. This is appalling, and usually a parent doesn't even look at reviews or ratings for these video games before they buy them for their young children. By virtue of my parents saying it was not proper for me and that I could use my time in a more positive way, kept me from playing these violent video games. I chose instead to do activities such as violin, shopping, and swimming. This activity challenged me because I was irritated that 17-year-olds are encouraged to commit crimes to get to the next level in this game, and with the next highest level comes more brutal violence. Not only do they have to commit crime, but they become more frequent and violent as you achieve the goal of the game. While I played, I felt repulsed that society would have us raise principled, law-abiding children, but has no problem letting the minors dabble in crime for entertainment. I worry that these games could cause actual crimes by children thinking this is just a game. One study conducted at Iowa State University says the study published in April issue of Youth Violence and Juvenile Justice examined the level of video game exposure for 227 juvenile offenders in Pennsylvania. The average offender had committed nearly 9 serious acts of violence, such as gang fighting, hitting a parent, or attacking another person in the prior year. The results show that both the frequency of playing and affinity for violent games were strongly associated with delinquent and violent behavior. I felt reinforced that most female activities are more nurturing and repulsed by violence. I find this hard to be entertaining, especially being a mother. I would never let my son play any of these violent games. The University of Iowa also states if you have a kid who is antisocial, who is a little bit vulnerable to influence, give them something that allows them to escape into themselves for a long period of time isn't a healthy thing. Parents need to be more aware of what their children are watching, playing, and doing, period, instead of throwing a game in their face and walking off. I would not participate in this activity again. It simply is not my realm of what entertainment is. With violent video game pros and cons saying 68% of American households play computer or video games, I would rather live in reality than a fantasy world of murder and mayhem any day. I think these games have an adverse effect on people's lives, and I would not want to be one to model this type of behavior in front of my own son.